The first sound was not the gunfire. It was the slow, grinding noise of steel tracks biting into wet earth. At 7:12 a.m. on February 27, 1945, near the village of Uedem in western Germany, a British Churchill tank crawled forward through a narrow farm road lined with bare trees and broken fences. The morning was cold. Frost clung to the grass. Smoke from burning barns drifted across the fields, turning everything into a gray blur. Inside the Churchill, 5 men sat in near darkness, surrounded by thick steel and the smell of oil, cordite, and sweat. The tank was moving at little more than walking speed. To the crew, every second felt dangerous. To the enemy, it looked like an easy target. And somewhere beyond the smoke, hidden behind a hedgerow, a German Panther Ausf G was already turning to attack from the side.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
Yet the British crew did not know it yet, but within the next few minutes, their heavy infantry tank would face one of the most lethal armored predators of the war. One machine was built to endure punishment and support soldiers at close range. The other was designed to hunt tanks and kill them with one shot from over a kilometer away. You can almost hear the quiet inside the Churchill turret. The gunner's eyes fixed to the sight, the driver gripping the steering levers, the commander scanning through his cupola, trying to see shapes through the smoke. Then the commander notices movement, not ahead, to the right, and suddenly everything changes. By early 1945, British armored units were pushing deep into Germany as part of Operation Veritable. Their objective was to clear the Reichwald forest and open the road toward the Rhine. It was slow, brutal fighting. Winter rain had turned fields into mud, roads were cratered, villages became strong points defended by anti-tank guns, hidden infantry, and the remaining armored reserves of the German army. Among the British tanks moving through this landscape was the Churchill Mk VII, one of the most recognizable tanks of the Second World War. It looked heavy and almost old-fashioned. Its tall hull and long track runs gave it a deliberate, lumbering appearance. But appearances were deceptive. The Churchill had some of the thickest armor of any Allied tank in Europe. The Mk VII carried frontal armor up to 152 millimeters thick. Its side armor was also formidable. Unlike faster cruiser tanks, the Churchill was designed to work closely with infantry, climbing steep slopes, crossing shell craters, and absorbing punishment that would destroy lighter vehicles. Its top speed was only about 15 miles per hour on roads, and much less in mud. No one who served in a Churchill expected to outrun danger. They expected to survive it. The crew of a Churchill consisted of 5 men. The commander directed the fight and watched for threats. The gunner aimed the 75mm main gun. The loader handled shells, often under extreme stress. The driver maneuvered the 40-ton vehicle through impossible terrain. The hull machine gunner assisted and maintained communications. The tank's greatest strength was its armor and its ability to go where other tanks could not. Its greatest weakness was speed. And on a battlefield where a few seconds could decide life or death, slowness could be fatal. Facing them was one of Germany's most feared tanks, the Panther Ausf. G Panther had first appeared on the Eastern Front in 1943, after German forces encountered the Soviet T-34. German engineers wanted a machine with sloped armor, high mobility, and a gun capable of defeating enemy tanks at long range. The result was the Panther Ausf G, the final and most refined wartime version of the Panther series. By 1945, the Panther G was a deadly opponent. Its 7.5-centimeter KWK-42L/70 gun fired armor-piercing rounds at very high velocity. At typical combat ranges, it could penetrate nearly any British tank from the front. The Panther's frontal armor, sharply sloped, was difficult to defeat even with powerful Allied guns. The side armor, however, was much thinner. Experienced tank commanders knew this well. The Panther was at its most dangerous when it engaged from a concealed frontal position. If an enemy reached its flank, the balance could change instantly. But if the Panther reached your flank first, survival became unlikely. That was exactly what Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Ritter intended. Ritter was a veteran commander with the 116th Panzer Division, known as the Windhund Division. His unit had fought in Normandy, the Ardennes, and now the desperate defense of Western Germany. He understood the strengths of his tank and the weaknesses of the enemy. Against a Churchill, he knew he had one major advantage: speed. His Panther could move quickly across open ground, reposition behind cover, and strike from unexpected angles. The British Churchill, heavily armored but slow to turn and accelerate, could be outmaneuvered if caught in the wrong terrain. At dawn, Ritter's crew took position behind a hedge overlooking a muddy road bordered by fields and farm buildings. Visibility was poor, but intermittent gaps in the smoke offered short windows to observe movement. At 7:10 a.m., the radio operator reported British tanks approaching from the west. Ritter raised his binoculars. Through the drifting haze, he saw the unmistakable shape of a Churchill, tall, slow, heavy, moving almost alone. He did not order immediate fire. Instead, he chose something more dangerous. He would flank. Inside the British tank, Major Robert Ellison of the 6th Guards Tank Brigade studied the road ahead. Ellison was a calm and experienced officer. His Churchill, call sign Cuckoo 2, was supporting infantry from the Coldstream Guards as they advanced toward German defensive positions near Uedem. The ground was terrible. Mud sucked at the tracks. Every turn demanded patience. Infantry moved beside the tank, using its armored hull as cover. Ellison knew German armor could be nearby. Reports from the night before mentioned Panthers operating in the area. But visibility was so poor that every tree stump and burned wagon looked like a possible threat. At 7:12 a.m., the Churchill crested a slight rise and entered a more open section of road. That was when Ritter moved. The Panther emerged from concealment and accelerated along a tree line to the south. Its Maybach engine roared as 45 tons of steel surged through the mud. The driver, Unteroffizier Franz Keller, steered aggressively, using folds in the ground to stay hidden. The maneuver was risky. If British infantry spotted them, anti-tank weapons could engage. If the tank bogged down, they would be exposed. But the opportunity was worth it. Ritter wanted a side shot. Inside the Churchill, the driver felt the tank lurch over deep ruts. The engine strained. The turret was facing forward, scanning the road ahead. The commander remained focused on the suspected threat axis. Then, for a split second, Ellison saw movement through the smoke to his right. Not infantry. A turret. Long barrel. Low silhouette. Panther. His voice snapped through the intercom. Right side. Traverse. Right. The gunner spun the turret controls. The Churchill's powered traverse began turning, but the movement was slow compared to what the situation demanded. The British tank was still rotating when the Panther stopped. Ritter had reached exactly the angle he wanted, about 600 meters away. The Churchill's side armor was now partially exposed. The German gunner, Feldwebel Otto Weiss, centered the sight on the British hull. The reticle settled. Range confirmed. Weiss fired. The 75mm armor-piercing round crossed the field in less than a second. Inside the Churchill, the impact felt like a giant hammer striking the hull. The shell punched through the side armor near the engine compartment. Fragments tore through machinery and fuel lines. Flames erupted at the rear of the fighting compartment. The lights flickered. Smoke filled the tank. The loader was thrown against the turret wall. The driver shouted that the engine was losing power. But the Churchill was not destroyed. Its heavy construction absorbed part of the damage. Fire suppression bottles discharged automatically, reducing the flames. The tank slowed but remained operational. Major Ellison knew they had only moments. The Panther was already reloading. Keep turning, he ordered. The Churchill's turret continued to swing toward the threat. The gunner struggled to find the Panther through smoke and shaking optics. Outside, British infantry dropped into ditches as tracers and fragments whipped across the road. Ritter watched the enemy tank survive the first hit. That surprised him. The Churchill's armor and internal layout had prevented immediate catastrophe. But he was not concerned. He knew a second shot would likely finish the job. Weiss loaded another Pease GR 39/42 armor-piercing round. The breech closed. The Panther fired again. This time the shell struck the Churchill's turret side. The impact jammed the traverse mechanism and wounded the loader with steel splinters. The gunner was momentarily blinded by dust and smoke. The turret stopped moving. For a few terrifying seconds, the Churchill could neither rotate nor fire. Inside the tank, the crew worked by instinct. The commander checked casualties. The loader, bleeding from his shoulder and face, insisted he could continue. The gunner manually adjusted the turret using emergency controls. The driver tried to angle the tank, presenting thicker frontal armor to the enemy. The Churchill was wounded, but it was still in the fight. Nearby British infantry had seen the flashes from the Panther's position. A PIAT team moved into a drainage ditch, hoping to get closer. They knew they were unlikely to penetrate the Panther from the front at this range, but even a distraction could buy time. Ritter remained focused on the crippled Churchill. He ordered a slight reposition to maintain the flank angle. The Panther advanced several meters. And that movement, though minor, exposed more of its side profile. Inside the Churchill, the gunner finally found the target. The Panther appeared in the sight picture, broad and unmistakable. Range, approximately 550 meters. The British 75mm gun was less powerful than the Panther's long-barreled weapon, but at this distance, a well-placed shot into the side could be deadly. Major Ellison gave the order. "Fire!" The Churchill's gun thundered. The shell struck the lower side hull of the Panther, just behind the first road wheels. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then gray smoke began pouring from the engine deck. The hit had penetrated. Fragments damaged coolant lines and ignited components in the engine compartment. Ritter felt the tank shudder. Warning lights illuminated. The driver reported a drop in power. The Panther was still combat capable, but its mobility was compromised. Now both tanks were damaged. Both crews knew the next accurate shot could decide everything. The Panther fired again. This round struck the Churchill's frontal track assembly, blowing off sections of the right track and immobilizing the British tank. The Churchill could no longer maneuver. It was a stationary target, but its gun was still operational. Ellison understood the situation clearly. There would be no retreat. No repositioning, only one chance to end the duel before the Panther delivered a final killing shot. The loader rammed another round into the breech despite his injuries. The gunner steadied his breathing. Through the smoke, he aimed at the Panther's turret side as it adjusted position. You can almost feel the silence inside the turret. The battle outside is chaos, but for the gunner there is only the target, the crosshair, and the knowledge that one squeeze of the trigger may determine whether all 5 men live or die. Fire! The Churchill recoiled. The shell hit the Panther's turret ring. The effect was immediate. The turret jammed. Hot fragments burst through the fighting compartment, wounding the gunner and loader inside the German tank. Smoke filled the turret. Ritter attempted to traverse. Nothing happened. His most powerful weapon was disabled. The Panther's hull machine guns were useless against heavy armor. For the first time in the engagement, the advantage shifted. British infantry saw the Panther hesitate. The PIAT team advanced to within 80 meters, moving from ditch to ditch. Lance Corporal Thomas Avery knelt, shouldered the awkward spring-loaded weapon, and fired. The bomb arced toward the Panther's right side. It struck near the rear hull. The shaped charge detonated, damaging the already burning engine compartment. Flames erupted from the exhaust grills. Inside the Panther, thick smoke became unbearable. Ritter knew the tank was lost. He ordered the crew to abandon. The hatches flew open. German crewmen climbed out and ran toward nearby cover. Seconds later, fire reached ammunition stored inside the hull. A violent explosion blew the turret upward and sent black smoke high into the winter sky. The Panther Ausf G was destroyed. Inside the Churchill, the British crew remained frozen for a moment, hardly believing they were still alive. The enemy that had nearly killed them was now burning in the field, but their own tank was badly damaged. The engine struggled, and the right track was severed. The interior was filled with smoke and spent cartridge cases. The loader was wounded. The commander radioed for recovery and medical assistance. As infantry secured the area, Ellison climbed partially out of the cupola and looked across the field at the burning German tank. The duel had lasted only a few minutes, yet for everyone involved it felt much longer. The battle near Uedem was one of countless armored engagements fought during the final months of the war in Europe. Many did not involve large formations or famous commanders. Instead, they were sudden encounters between small crews relying on training, judgment, and nerve. The Churchill and Panther represented two very different approaches to armored warfare. The Churchill was not fast. It was not elegant. Its gun was adequate rather than exceptional. But it possessed extraordinary protection and the ability to continue fighting after severe damage. The Panther was sleek, deadly, and highly effective at long range. Its gun and optics gave German crews a formidable advantage, but its thinner side armor and mechanical vulnerabilities could be exploited when circumstances changed. In this duel, those design choices mattered. The Panther gained the initiative through mobility and tactical maneuver. The Churchill survived because of armor and disciplined crew performance. The final result was shaped not by one factor alone, but by a combination of engineering, training, and human determination. Major Robert Ellison and his crew were later commended for remaining in action despite multiple penetrating hits. Their Churchill was eventually towed to a repair area. The loader recovered from his wounds. The tank itself, scarred and battered, was returned to service after extensive repairs. For the men inside, the memory stayed vivid. The first impact, the smoke, the knowledge that the next shell might be the last, and the extraordinary moment when a supposedly slower, less powerful tank turned the battle around. German veterans who served in Panthers often respected the Churchill more than wartime statistics suggest. They knew its armor could absorb punishment that would destroy lighter vehicles. They also understood that British crews were experienced and persistent, especially when working closely with infantry. Likewise, British tankers feared the Panther. They knew its gun could kill from distances where their own weapons struggled. The appearance of a Panther's long barrel through smoke or fog was enough to raise every heartbeat inside a turret. When historians compare tanks, they often focus on numbers, armor thickness, gun penetration, speed, and production totals. These details are important, but they tell only part of the story. A tank was not merely steel and machinery. It was 5 men trusting each other in conditions of extreme danger. A commander making decisions in seconds. A gunner holding steady despite shock and noise. A loader working through run and exhaustion. A driver maneuvering blind through mud and smoke. And every one of them knowing that a single mistake could be fatal. By March 1945, Allied forces were closing in on the Rhine. German armored units fought stubbornly but lacked fuel, replacement crews, and air support. Even so, individual Panthers remained dangerous opponents until the final weeks of the war. The Churchill continued serving with British and Commonwealth forces, supporting infantry in some of the most difficult terrain in Europe. Its slow speed was often criticized, but those who depended on its armor remembered it differently. They remembered a tank that kept moving when others would have burned. They remembered a machine that gave crews a second chance. On that freezing morning near Uedem, that second chance made all the difference. The Panther had the better gun. It had reached the flank. It fired first. By every tactical measure, the British crew should have been finished. But war rarely follows expectations. Armor held. Training took over. A wounded loader kept loading. A gunner found his target through smoke. Infantry joined the fight. And a slow-moving Churchill turned what should have been an ambush into a victory. If you stood in that field after the battle, you would see two tanks transformed by minutes of violence. One burned fiercely, sending sparks into the cold sky. The other sat motionless on the road, scarred but intact, its crew alive inside. That image captures something essential about armored warfare in the Second World War. Not every victory belonged to the fastest tank. Not every defeat came to the weaker gun. Sometimes survival depended on the ability to endure one more hit, fire one more round, and remain calm for a few seconds longer than the enemy. The Churchill was slow. The Panther flanked from the side. And yet, in the smoke and mud of Western Germany, the tank that seemed outmatched refused to die. And because 5 men inside that steel hull kept fighting, the hunter became the hunted.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.